Today, I will be talking about relationships and happiness with Trip Lanier, professional coach and author from North Carolina, USA. Hello, Trip, and very
Uh,
welcome to our Open to Happiness podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Shall we start with this simple but yet complicated question? What is happiness to you, Trip?
What is happiness? Well, I consider happiness to be a state and not something to strive to like stay there. So there are moments of happiness and then kind of come back to more of a baseline of maybe whatever a baseline is for somebody. For some people that's a really neurotic place. For some people that may be more of a peaceful place. But I tend to associate happiness with a sense of reward and accomplishment or deep satisfaction in something, and maybe tied to more events and things that are happening, circumstantial, those types of things. And then that's different than peace of mind, which is I may have a sense of peace just going throughout my day as I'm dealing with things, but it's not necessarily dependent upon getting something done or being important or those types of things.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. What has been your relationship with happiness then? As you know, look back, are you able to maybe comment a little bit on that as much as you can share?
Yeah, I don't use the word happiness very often, so it's not a word I'm very I think I've thought of happiness as something that can be a bit of a trap if you're striving for it all the time. I look for words that mean that are more important to me would be something like well-being or satisfaction. Those are things that I feel like I can zero in on. What would give me a greater sense of well-being today? What would give me a greater sense of peace today? What would be satisfying for me in whatever I'm doing today? And maybe that's what people might associate with happiness, but I've found that to be a bit a bit easier for me to think about rather than happiness is kind of closer to these ecstatic states or like, wow, I'm so happy and this is amazing. And I appreciate those states, but I don't really associate, I don't drive towards those very much.
Mhm. As you remember growing up, how did you feel then in life? Did you have moments of joy or inner peace or something that might be associated with a pleasant internal state?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, where I tend to experience happiness is laughing with friends. Um, I think about when I was in a band and playing music, performing music together or writing music. Those were extremely happy periods. And uh, yeah, I have so many different happy moments and happiness that I experience in my life today. But I always feel grateful when they come, but it never feels like I can grasp onto it and like hold on to it, that kind of thing.
That's true. They are all transient, aren't they? Just like life, like the
Right.
nature itself.
Hmm.
Cool. So now, Trip, you are a professional coach yourself, and an author. You wrote an interesting book. You host a podcast yourself. We're going to go into detail in a moment. I wonder what happened throughout your life that inspired you somehow to join the helping professions, to be there for people, to be in the service of others. If you want to maybe share a bit more about yourself and how was your journey in life, what led you to that point of helping others?
Yeah, I think I always enjoyed having more genuine or deeper conversations with people. And I enjoyed feeling the satisfaction that came from helping people. Um, Whether it was early on and not being very skillful and thinking I needed to give everybody advice, or I learned a little later on where just listening could be more helpful to people. So I think that just having a baseline of that and allowing or kind of being willing to ask deeper questions or be more sensitive to what was going on with people and being willing to ask them, hey, what's going on? I'm noticing XYZ or whatever. And just in my own life, my own journey, um, dealing, going from a place where, my mother took her life when I was 13 and then my
Oh,
own
sorry to hear
journey
that.
of
Mm.
having to kind of figure that out and work through that into my 20s was really when started to kind of, I was able to start to work through that. And so that was, I mean, having an aversion to having depth and intimacy and any kind of emotional vulnerability, to now looking for opportunities to play in those areas or to connect in those areas. I found that much more rewarding, and also just feeling like this is why we're really here. So, helping doesn't mean always getting into trauma or getting into deep, dark emotional stuff. For me as a coach, I see it as an extension of my art background, my music background, which is what are we really here to create? And through, most of us are just trying to get by in our day, and we've got distractions. We never ask ourselves those deeper questions. What is it that I'm really here to become? Or what do I really feel like I want to create in this lifetime that would be really satisfying? And so that's where I love to help. That's where I love to come in and have those deeper conversations, and then create an environment, create a container where that gets done.
It sounds fantastic, and I'm really sorry that you've been through that loss at such a fragile age.
Mm.
I'm learning every day that, like me and you and most of the others probably, we have all been through some sort of adversity in childhood, through some form of hardship. But of course, losing a parent, it's very difficult. I wonder, how was that linked with your career in music? You mentioned the background in music. What happened? How did you find music helpful? Um, Probably it was an environment that allowed you for a soothing experience in times when maybe you struggled. I can only imagine, because music is very um, pleasant for all of us, and I think it's an outlet that we should all make use of a bit more. So what was the connection between going through that loss in adolescence and then choosing music as probably a first career, if I get it right, and maybe how that shifted into coaching later on, if you want to maybe share a bit more?
Yeah, well, I would say, most of the music that I was making, especially early on, was pretty aggressive music. It was hard, and it allowed me to, I wasn't in touch with grief so much.
Yeah.
But I was more in touch with anger and
Yes.
aggression. And that really wasn't okay or welcome in my day-to-day life, but in the music, I could express that and find that energy, and it felt wonderful. It felt a relief. It was a relief to be able to play music and to move that energy, and it felt beautiful, and it also just felt fun. It felt healthy, and it felt I wasn't hurting anybody. I was creating something, and I felt like I was transmuting something,
Yeah.
that I was shifting something in me to do that. Now, eventually, after a while, it felt like I was kind of writing the same song or kind of staying stuck in a certain place, and it was time to move on. And my tastes, or I would say that the type of music that I created, moved on as I began to shift who I was in the world. But early on, it was a wonderful place to be able to work with that energy, because I don't think there was any other outlet for me to do that.
Yeah. It was really good that you actually chose to express whatever was what was going on inside of you, rather than pushing it down as we tend to do it. So did you actually become a musician? You wrote professional music? Did you play? Were you part of a band? What
I got
really
to lose a
happened?
lot of money doing it. Yeah. I
Did
don't know if I got to
have
do
you?
it professionally.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
spent most of my teens and my late teens, early 20s, and then also again in my mid to late 20s, really going for it. Yeah,
right,
we didn't get very far. I mean, I got to make some records out in Los Angeles and have some really amazing experiences in that regard, but it would never became. I don't think I was ever in danger of turning it into a career. That's for sure.
right. But it was an experience. It was amazing to start life in that environment, I would imagine. What's the takeaway from those years for you now, looking back, reflecting back a few years later?
I think I mean, I don't know how much this relates to what we're talking about, but I think that a lot of energy during that time started to get pushed. It was how do we become more visible and more successful, and without realizing, and I think that I lost touch with making music I really felt very strongly about. And um, I remember early on when I would write a song, I would feel so deeply about the song and be moved by the song. And I think I got away from that the more that we were trying to be out in the world and do things. And eventually it just became not that much fun anymore to do that. There's a lot of stuff in that's out in order to be able to play music and record the music. There's a lot of stuff you got to do that isn't very fun. And and so I went through a grieving period after I just like hung it up. I was like, this is no fun for me anymore, and I didn't really want to show any interest in music anymore. And I realized I wasn't moved by music as much anymore, and that was really tough. So
Mhm.
I associated it with some kind of, I guess, failure, or I didn't make it, or I wasn't good enough, or something like that. And then eventually it became, yeah, I reconnected with the music on a very simple, basic level, like we all should. And it was like, oh, it's really beautiful here. And I still make music to this day on my own, not for anybody else, but for myself. And so it's really satisfying in that way.
I would agree because now you're actually allowing the music to be a companion, to arise in you, to emerge in you, to unfold in you out of passion, not as a business. When we talk about a business now, things are a bit more complicated. The perspectives are shifting. So I would imagine that you are a composer and you play guitar because I see it back there. Are you vocal as
Yeah.
well? Are you singing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Correct.
do.
Yeah.
So that's
Hmm.
good because if you're using the voice in music, in singing, that's another way. It's a very healing experience as I'm learning myself in my life and working with people myself. So did you find it somehow cathartic? Did you feel like you are releasing some of the pain and some of the suffering, some of the struggles through voicing out whatever
Yeah,
you were
I
feeling
was a
about?
singer. I was a singer reluctantly. I was a singer essentially because we couldn't find another one. And
How
I
convenient.
was writing the songs, and here's the lyrics, and nobody else. So I couldn't find anybody to sing the songs, and so say, okay, well, I'll sing it. And so I never identified as a singer. I never identified as someone who wanted to be the singer or the front man. But I played guitar and sang at the same time. But I did learn um, that it creates a state change to sing. And of course, all the ancient traditions know this and the vocalizing and stuff. But I was discovering that on my own, and that I would get into certain states when I was singing, even just in rehearsal, that were very beautiful, and feeling, to be able to voice a thing or to connect it with what I was saying, the message that I was saying was really powerful. And I hadn't anticipated that. In my world, the voice was always just the melody that sat on top of the other instruments that were really cool. So
Right.
it was fun to discover that. And then I do appreciate just the physical thing that happens in the body physiologically when we sing and when we allow ourselves to express ourselves through voice.
I have the feeling when I listen to you that you talk about a very profound spiritual experience, an experience that naturally involves your physicality, your physical space that you occupy in this world with your body, because you're using this as a car case to move you through life. Um, but at the same time, you're experiencing life beyond this, beyond even this mind that is allowing you to compose and do the music, perform, maybe even for yourself or for your family and friends. You're transcending the experience of life in this physical space, and you're opening up yourself through music, through connecting with the sound, with the vibration of the universe. I think in a very, very special experience, um, you're connecting with the wholeness of who you represent, Trip, as a human
Mm.
being, as an entity, and you're connecting with the divine as well. I'm sensing when you talk about it, um, I'm sensing the joy that that is emerging in you when you talk about this experience, and I have no doubt that probably this has been this has been a vehicle that has helped you a lot through life.
Yeah, I appreciate
So,
you saying that, and it reminds me of times that I had where I felt torn because I would often write the songs in a certain state of mind, in hurting or struggling with something, but then perform them and it felt celebratory.
mhm,
And so I was like, well, I don't know if I want to sing about this this thing if this is feeling more joyous and celebratory right now, and other people are joining us and enjoying this. So I remember it was a shift, like how could I sing and align more with the spirit of celebration in that moment. But it's all transmutation. It was great to do that, but it was also like this is what's really happening. It's beautiful for us to get together and to be able to create music and to be loud and fun and but it was such a different mindset than when the music was written.
yeah. I can relate with this because obviously I'm not a creative myself. I'm not doing arts or anything, but a little bit in my work or in my life as a human being, in my relationships with others, I feel like we are all somehow co-creating life, co-creating these relationships. And I notice that sometimes um, a certain type of emotion or experience is being transformed as we interact with others. Um, and then I'm feeling that sometimes we function from a place of cognitive dissonance, from a place of internal conflict. Why am I feeling differently about the same kind of experience? And it points at the ambivalence of life. We are not really taught when we are taught when we are little that life is not black or white and it's not in the duality space anymore. There's so many nuances, there's so many layers, there's so many dimensions to the same experience. If we obviously leave ourselves open to experience, open to this joy, open to everything that might come. And I think this probably is somehow similar to what you're describing. The ambivalence of life is that through the same song, through the same experience, you can actually go to different emotions within you, or they can take you to different places within yourself, or even in the outside world. They can be transformed through this expression, and they can take all sorts of shapes. I think this is the extraordinary transformative experience of life, where nothing is fixed and rigid and everything is actually flowing and
Hmm.
expanding all the time. It matters how we make sense of it, I would say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. As you were saying, I was thinking of humor. For me, humor is when done in a way where it's not deflective to push things away, but I think being able to find the humor in the most kind of crazy situations is very healing, and it can help us in a tremendous way. And I grew up, my father was a cop, and he saw many terrible things and saw the worst people in humanity. And I remember he didn't go to therapy. He didn't have processing, but I remember they would sit around, he and his other cop buddies, and they'd have drinks, and I'd just hear them laugh. And I intuited early on that that's how they were dealing with it. And that was a way for them to work through some of the stuff that just couldn't make sense. A lot of us have a picture of the world where things are fair and right, and then there's the reality that really terrible things happen to good people for no reason. And them being able to find humor in those situations, or even for me to find humor in situations, even with my own clients, it's really healing when they can find a place to laugh at the thing that felt so terrible several years ago. We can find a place to find a little glimpse of humor in there. It can be incredibly healing to 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 have that perspective and just kind of look at life and be like, wow, isn't life crazy? The way that it's happening there. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
of humor in the same way. Yeah.
beautiful. I would agree with that. Humor is so important. It's art. It's an art in itself. The
Yeah.
capacity to actually um, retain this sense of openness towards seeing much more than the evil that is presented in front of you, or the nastiness of life. Um, it requires a little bit of courage, because it's more tempting to fall into the victimhood mentality and think someone or something is absolutely terrible. But to
Mhm.
see beyond that, it does require a little bit of bravery. So now you are into music. Let's go back on track. How are you making the transition towards coaching? What's happening there for you?
Well, I whether I communicate this with others very much, but I see coaching as an extension of art. And whereas I may feel comfortable taking risks or being creative with photography or a painting or a song, what happens when we take that mentality and start to apply that to our lives? And most of us don't do that because it's too serious and we got to get it right. But that's usually when our art gets crappy, is when we take it too seriously. I was talking about earlier with the business stuff. We got to get it right. And so for me, it's like, yeah, how would we look at our lives differently if we were considering a art? How would we live artfully? And a lot of us, that's a new question. We don't even know what artfully means, but we would probably be more bold. We'd probably be more playful. We'd probably be willing to fail more often and try things, and not take it so seriously. At least not take ourselves so seriously. And I love that. I love being challenged to look at my own life that way and my own relationships that way. I don't gravitate towards kind of the achiever mindset or the competitor mindset. That doesn't really fit me that well. But if we stand back and be like, yeah, what would be artful about, this vacation or this business or this relationship or sex or whatever, and then it gets exciting for me. And I find that's where I like to play with that.
Oh, so beautiful. So you're starting coaching as an extension of the art that you're doing. And how come you're connecting with the clients, and who do you work with, and how do you help them?
Yeah, ironically, I work with a lot of the high achiever competitor types. So, but I think they find it welcoming to get out of this more. Everything has to be more. They're a lot of the people that I work with have been very driven or successful and wanted and set out to do things in their lives, and then realized that if reaching whatever level of success that they've reached isn't as fulfilling as they thought it would be. And some people figure this out at a pretty young age, some figure it out later on. But ultimately they just want to do work that's more meaningful, more satisfying. They want to be more playful in their lives and not take things so seriously, but they also don't want to live in their car. And so there's a way of wanting to, they recognize that something else is trying to shift or move in their life, and they just can't stay on the same trajectory that they've been on for so long. So but they're at a loss, like they don't really see what's next for them. And so that feels like a beautiful opportunity to get creative and start to ask deeper questions, recognize that they're mortal, and then yeah, well, how do you want to approach the years that you have left? We don't know how much you have left, so how do you want to approach it? What would be satisfying for you?
What a gorgeous way of talking about our relational aspect of life. So we've been talking a little bit about the relationship between Trip with Trip, you with yourself, you
Mm.
with music, you some aspects with the family, you with your audience, now with your clients. It's all about relationships. And then at some point, you write a book. This book will make you dangerous. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about it, how it came about, when was it published, and in a few words, if you can summarize, what is the message? What is its core message?
Mm. Yeah, I would say that this book would make you dangerous came out a few years ago, and essentially I was like, well, what would I want my daughter to learn? She's going to be into this world pretty soon, and even though it's not very appropriate for my daughter, at least at that age, it was not very appropriate. It's a pretty irreverent book, but I I see folks taking life so seriously, and but to the point where they don't take other things more seriously, like their own mental well-being and their peace of mind, and kind of just in a nutshell, not really getting what it's about, like losing the depth of their own gifts, like not realizing what they're here to give, not realizing what they're here to share, not realizing what they're here to experience. And then hoping that one day they'll finally have enough of XYZ and then be allowed to live from this deeper place. And so I just talk about how I help people live more from that place today, not one day once they've finished gotten across some finish line. And, but to do so in a way where they don't take themselves so seriously, they get to be more bold, they get to be more playful, and essentially just kind of allow. And I use the word allow because it's not something to achieve, but just to allow more of that, the experiences that we want to have on a daily basis: freedom, aliveness, love, peace, things that live in that neighborhood. And um and it's been resonating a lot with people.
I can believe that it did. What I'm hearing is an invitation for men in particular, I would say, to be more mindful, to embrace the present moment, to be here now, to make the best of this gift of life that is, unfolding in front of their eyes every moment, rather than leaving themselves abandoned into you know, the suffering of the past, or just getting lost into the anxiety around the future. Um, is mindfulness really at the core of the book? Are you actually teaching people through your learnings how to be more present, how to be more here?
I think it's implied. If
Yeah.
I'm wanting to steer my life in the direction, I need to be present. I can't be in the past. I can't be 20 miles down the road. I need to be
Mhm.
at the wheel and paying attention to where I am. So mindfulness is definitely implied, for sure. Yeah. And the way that I do that is essentially by helping them just get more in touch with their experience in this moment, not the vision they have for a future or the hope that they have for a future where they've been able to escape whatever crappy feeling they're feeling now, but to be more in touch with what they're experiencing so that that can become a doorway to create something. So if I don't like feeling this way, then what do I do? How can I be creative? How can I be playful? How can I be bold to shift that, make a request, try something new, get out of this thing that I'm in and not just keep depriving myself for more years.
It's a lesson of unstucking, really. You're helping people
Mhm.
to unstuck themselves from where they got stuck. Maybe re-embodiment, just, come back home, be in touch with this physicality. Check a little bit more on your mindset. What is it that is helpful there? What's not helpful? And then maybe get in touch with your emotions as well. Beautiful, beautiful. And then, as an extension to this, you also opened a podcast, which has been going on for a while. Maybe you can say a few words about the New Man podcast.
Yeah, so the new man, I think we started in 2007. So we've been doing it for a while.
Wow.
And,
Yes.
at that
16.
time, the landscape was very different in terms of what was available for men's personal growth, men's personal development, men's spiritual development. It was essentially a women dominated field. It was Oprah, and that was
Yeah.
it, kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Mm.
So I was heavily into personal and spiritual growth, but so much of that information was up on the mountain, so to speak. It was all very high level and in wisdom speak. And I was like, hey, the rest of us guys down here need something that speaks to us. And my buddy who's going through a divorce and drinking himself to sleep every night needs help. And there's
Yeah.
not a lot. He doesn't see anything that is meant for him, let's say.
Yes.
And so I wanted to try to bridge that gap a little bit between all of this high level spiritual and personal growth stuff and stuff that might be more helpful to the rest of us.
And how did it go? This so many years, 16 years. Well, how was it like for you to actually host this for so many years? And what have you
Yeah,
learned? Just share as much as you can.
it's gone really well. I mean, we've had millions and millions of listens, and people have checked it out all around the world, and that's been really rewarding. It's tough to get a sense of the reach because I just put a microphone in my
Yeah.
face, but I do meet people if I travel and I go to a conference or a thing, and people will come up to me and say they've been listening for years. So in those moments, it's like, wow, it is real. It does go out and hit people, and it's not just an email that comes in. So I always appreciate being able to see people and hear how it's impacted their lives. And then for me, I have shifted, I've grown so much in those years where I felt very much kind of a new person in this field and very curious and wanting to essentially bring in as many people as I could to learn from. And then being a coach, becoming a coach and being able to translate some of the things that I was learning into the podcast as well. And so it's been, as I've grown, my relationship to the podcast has grown, and how I approach it has shifted as well. And that's um I've had to take my own medicine, because there's a part of me says, well, it's done this way. You got to like stick to the formula, instead of like, well, no, where am I growing? What's true for me? Where's the fun? Where's the playfulness? Where's the juice for me? So let's take some chances. And some people may not like it, but we're gonna take it in this direction.
Absolutely. Because it's your creation, it's your baby. I mean, yeah. So who is the new man then? Talk to us a little bit about this. Who are you talking to?
Yeah.
Or who is the
Yeah. The new man, I don't believe in these archetypes. I've met so many people that were like, tell me how to be a man. They just want to be told what to do. And so I much prefer to like, well, who is within you? And I don't think there's anything we've ever really talked about on the new man that was so explicit to just men, because we have a lot of women listeners. And it's really about who are you at on a level of wholeness. And I appreciate those conversations. We never really get into this is what it's about to be a man. But that said, it's about being integrated. It's about being a sexual being. It's about being someone with courage. It's about being someone with heart, somebody who has brains, somebody that is in the world and creating in the world. And again, I don't think that's anything to do with being a man per se.
Wow, so beautiful. It sounds a little bit empowering, a bit different to our cultural programming, especially in the Western world. And it's somehow freeing, I think. It's freeing you as men, I would imagine, to fit boxes and fit profiles and be a particular way. Just
Mhm.
allows for a sense of liberation, and just be yourself, be who you are, and that should be all right. I think it's more important to be true to yourself than fit a particular category or box. So beautiful. Would you like maybe to share what's been your greatest um, gift through all of these years of hosting this podcast, for you as a human being, as a man yourself?
The biggest gift, I think.
Mhm.
I think that the places where I've allowed myself to reveal just more of who I am, and not be an archetype, or not be somebody who is supposed to be embodying all of these things of perfection. I rebel against that anyway.
Right.
I don't like that pressure. And in fact, years ago, I created a video as if somebody had hacked into my camera and was recording me while I was coaching people, and I was doing all these terrible things and coaching people in a terrible way. I wanted to dismantle this idea that I was somehow perfect, or that I just
Yeah.
because I talk about these things that somehow I embody all of them. And the gift is that we get to be imperfect. We get to be as we are and who we are, and that's we can be forgiven for that, we can be accepted for that, we can be loved for that. And I think that's what we ultimately want. It's not I'll be loved and accepted and forgiven once I'm perfect. And so I think that that's been, at least for me, the most beautiful message, is that we don't have to strive for that, whatever that perfection or enough is. That just being ourselves, and even desiring to be more of ourselves and enhance that, that's wonderful. But there's so many men, and myself included, that can be very harsh on ourselves if we don't meet some kind of ideal, and just being able to relax that feels very liberating.
It sounds like a sense of acceptance of what is, acceptance of ourselves, rather than living torn in this internal turmoil, self-sabotaging, hurting ourselves, which comes with you're right, with the social pressure and the programming. And it's hard to escape that status quo, but it is possible, and you've done it, and you're teaching others how, you're guiding others how to do it. And I absolutely value and appreciate your sense of authenticity, Trip. Thank you so much for that. It's so refreshing to actually talk to a man that is openly discussing his inner process, his plans, the reason beyond any kind of action and project that he will do through life. I really accept that. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. I wish we could talk a bit more. It's very interesting. But maybe now at the end, Trip, if you can maybe share the three most important learnings for you or teachings that you have for the others to live a happy and fulfilling life.
Yeah, I would say I go over this in my book, but essentially, there is no exoneration. We're always gonna, as one of my coaches, Phil Stutz says, we're always gonna have to deal with effort. We're always gonna have to deal with pain. We're always gonna have to deal with uncertainty at a certain level. So I think a lot of us are stuck in a trap that we really think we're gonna get over that. We're gonna get away from that somehow. If I just get with this person, or I just get this to this place financially or whatever, then I can escape that stuff. And there's a huge amount of suffering that comes from that. If that's the main driver to seeking this escape, there's a huge amount of suffering. And so it can be a tough pill to swallow, but I think that it also helps us relax and just enjoy our lives as they are. And then I would say that just not taking ourselves so seriously is huge. It helps to have people around us that can remind us of that, and my wife loves to remind me.
Beautiful.
And my friends love me. My best friends are the ones that take the piss out of me, as they say. And it's not to belittle me, but just any time where I'm the most suffering I experience is when all I'm thinking about is me. And so it's nice to be able to relax that and just think like this, no matter what, this is just not going to be that big of a deal.
Mm.
And then I think just whatever I can do to stay playful in a scenario, it just makes life so much more rewarding for me to stay playful in any situation. I would say those three things come to mind. You ask me tomorrow, I'll probably say something different.
But it's indeed, it sounds brilliant. Honestly, it does. It's full of wisdom. It's down to earth. It is achievable. It's possible. And I can see why it helps. It helps you. It helps the people you work with. Can you share maybe with our listeners and watchers, where can they find a little bit more info about you
Hmm.
and
Yeah, if you
about the
want to
book,
learn,
about the podcast, anything really?
yeah, triplanier.com will have most of the information you're looking for about the book and coaching. And you can also find the podcast, The New Man, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be on there.
Thank you so much, Trip. It's been amazing to chat with you. Thank you so much for all the gifts you bring into the world, for sharing them with us, all of the others. And I'm wishing you the best of luck with everything you you plan to do in the future. Many thanks for your time, for your energy, for your mental space, for everything, all the resources that you used here today with our podcast. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.